Hi everyone, I hope you're all okay and managing during this challenging period. With so much change and uncertainty around the globe, we felt it was the perfect time to reach out and bring you some salient insights as we forecast a world beyond COVID-19. In a recent McKinsey's article called "The Future is Not What It Used to Be," it says for some organizations, near-term survival is the only agenda item. Others are peering through the fog of uncertainty, thinking how to position themselves once the crisis has passed and things return to normal. The question is, what will normal look like? While no one can say how long the process will last, what we find on the other side will still not look like the normal of recent years. In this chat today, I'm delighted to be joined by internationally renowned business futurist Miselowski, the futurist behind our recent social media phenomenon, hashtag PhysioNextGen. And we're going to talk about life now and after lockdown, predictions, opportunities, and what's next for global healthcare. Hi Morris, lovely to see you, and I love the new beard. I presume it's new.
Yeah, it is. It's my COVID present to myself.
That's fantastic.
I decided if I couldn't grow hair on top, I might as well grow it here.
Well, I'm inspired. So, first question, what do you think has irrevocably changed in our world since the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's a fascinating question, and one that I'm looking forward to finding the answer to on the other side of it, because truthfully, we don't know yet. There are lots of things, though, that we think that will change, or at least will have nudged, and I think that's the more important thing. I'm being really careful at the moment. As a futurist, you and I worked on a project of 2050, and I'm really comfortable working that far out normally, and even into 2100. I've had my wings clipped in the last couple of months, because I'm beginning to talk about strategy 5 weeks out. I mean, that really is what the future looks like now. And I'm working in a 0 to 2 week horizon, 2 to 5 weeks and 5 week plus. And that's just something that I'm so not used to. So the answer to your question is, I think there are lots of things that will nudge, things that will change. We really won't know till the other end. The biggest change for me, and something that we'll talk about, I'm sure, throughout our chat, is the strong reality that if nothing else comes out of this, there will be an added ease with using digital, internet, or whatever we want to call this space.
Yeah.
Before, for many businesses, especially in health as well, it was an add-on. It was something else we did as well as the physical object. If it was around, it was great. If it wasn't, then we didn't bother. We went back to the physicality. We've learned now a really strong lesson as a society, as a humanity, that digital is here to stay, internet's here to stay, insert the word that you're most comfortable with. We knew it, we just hadn't lived through it. That when the physical's not available to us, second best is digital, and sometimes it's even first best. Sometimes it works just as well. And that, to me, will be one of the biggest shifts, the ease with which we begin to use the internet now, the rise and change in business models, the way that health adapts and changes to this. And again, as I've said, we'll talk about that quite a bit in just a few moments. That will be the most fundamental change that we see. And the underlying things, which I hope will remain with us, is that there is a strong sense that humanity has shifted. Not better or worse, but the way that we interact with each other, the change in family structure, the change in education, all those sorts of things, I'm hoping will leave a legacy for the better.
Yeah, I think we've all noticed that in our own families, haven't we? What industries do you think have proven to be COVID resistant, if any?
So there are quite a few. And we need to be really careful about that. One of the things that I'm talking a lot about in the last few months is that, yes, this is terrible, and not for a moment are we excusing or saying anything positive out of it. The reality is that we all know what's caused it and how impacted we are. But when we look at cold, hard facts, there are still industries that are booming. There are industries that have grown out of this COVID, and there are next generation industries as well that are coming out of it. So the industries that are currently working incredibly hard and employing people, strangely, are things like government-funded services, because the government has really kicked in a big way. So health, the thing that you and I are involved with, police, defence, welfare, aged care, disability, transport, logistics, those sorts of things are on the rise. Jobs available, people are still working 9 to 5. They're the people that we give our heartfelt thanks to because they're keeping us alive and safe and doing things for us. Construction and building are still going ahead, especially in large infrastructure, but I'm finding with commercial and residential properties as well. So construction industry, again, all of these have new imposts on them. They have the 1.5 metre, they're all adjusting. They're not exactly like they were, but they're all there. Technology's booming. The fact that you and I are sitting on this now comfortably in this Zoom space and we're talking to each other, whereas a few months ago we would not have thought of it. We came down to the office, we shook hands, we had wonderful conversations and we were together physically. So all this kind of software that we're now using, and we're using it with our families, we're having catch-ups, we're having trivia nights, we're doing all kinds of things. This software wasn't built to do this, by the way, Anton. It wasn't. We've jerry-rigged it. We're kind of using it beyond its capacity. So there are a whole lot of people, including the makers of this software, that are out there trying to figure out how they evolve it. What does it become? What's missing? What will people want that we currently don't have? So that industry I'm seeing is growing now. The essential industries, of course, groceries, bottle shops, pharmacies, all those sorts of things are still on the increase. You've got mining and resource, and of course, embedded in all of those, but I want to give a huge shout out, as do all of us, the health industry. Health and allied industries are, of course, central to this process that we're going through at the moment. So there are lots of businesses, lots of jobs that are still available and still around.
Maurice, obviously border closures have proved to be a big part of our whole response as Australia to the COVID-19 pandemic. And us as an international regulator of physiotherapists, we assess a number of international physios coming into Australia. And so border closures have a massive impact on our business. What do you think the future is around those border closures once we have perhaps a vaccine, or if we don't have a vaccine? How will Australia deal with border closures in the next 6 months going forward?
I think border closures of our island are most probably around for more than 6 months. And again, I don't know anything more than the average person. So I've been speaking to lots of people looking at it, and I don't have the answer, no one does. But I have an answer, which I think is credible. And that is that the strong reality is that our borders internationally will most probably not be open for 6 and I think maybe even 12 months. Having said that, we will gain a couple of new states, I'm hoping, being New Zealand. North and South Island will most probably join Australia, or we them, whichever way you want to look at it, and that will become a bubble. And I think that is likely to happen between now and Christmas if all things continue, because we are safe and known to each other in all kinds of ways. There's much that we share, much that we know, much that we respect. So that should be an easier transition for us. So I'm imagining by Christmas time that there will be this bubble around us, Australia and New Zealand, or whatever we end up calling ourselves. The Anzacs will come back, in other words, and that will be the space. It will be difficult for people overseas without a particular need to be able to come to Australia, and likewise for people to travel out of Australia to have that opportunity. I'm also not sure that most of us will want to do it yet until we know that we can do it safely and in great health and come back again. It's kind of like going to the moon at the moment. You know, in the 60s, late 60s, 69, we kind of knew we could get there, but nobody's really sure we could bring anybody back. And I think we're going to see that similarity for a little while moving forward. So the answer is that you already, I mean, as a society, you already have done a whole lot of virtualization long before COVID. You were already looking at virtualization of being able to accredit, virtualization of being able to assess. So you've already gone down that road over the last few years and done it really well. We'll see an extension of that. We will see more online possibilities. We'll have to. The reason for doing this is not because we want to, because we have to. Life must continue in some way or other. It may not be as perfect or as easy as we once had it, but we will have to find a plan B and make ourselves believe it's plan A plus until we can do different. In the immediate terms, or maybe not immediate, but in the near immediate, I'm sensing now through my education clients and conversations that there's a possibility we may bring international students back into Australia before the general borders open up. That will have huge ramifications, huge imposts. Again, I use the word bubble a lot. I think we'll bring them in a bubble, meaning that they'll arrive in, we'll put them into quarantine, and they will be here for a medium to long term. So students that want to travel, want to study here for 2 or 3 years, and they'll need most probably to remain here and know that most probably be the case for a year or so at least. So some of the education system may impact, may come back. And I'm sensing maybe that many people, or a number of people, parents, might be somewhat comfortable if Australia and New Zealand can prove themselves to be a healthy, safe place. In other words, let's send our children over to that space in the world because it seems to be an okay place for them to live, doesn't seem to have any issues with it. Let's send them there to continue their education. The words I use often are lumpy and bumpy, and this is going to be a lumpy and bumpy ride for quite a while.
I think that's the reality of it. Just continuing kind of at the macro level, what do you think the impact of this pandemic has had on concepts like globalization? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around this. What do you think the impact of the pandemic on globalization will be?
It's fascinating because there is really a number of ways to approach that. Firstly, we've learned that we are a global society, and all the things that we knew that we just took for granted and we never really wanted to buy into. We are all in this together. The reality, the absolute reality of this entire scenario is that we are a weakest link activity at the moment. By that I mean, until the last person is inoculated or we have found a way to tame this, then none of us are safe. Even if there's only a handful of people on the planet that can't be inoculated, we will have to devise a way to overcome that. And that takes a global, it really does take the globe to make that happen. I'm loving the space, and health is one of the greatest showcases of this. The way that we are now working collaboratively across the planet, across time zones, across interests, across what before might have been all these physical boundaries or IP boundaries or trademark boundaries. We are now globalizing. Literally, if Anton, you come up with something, you share it with me, I then share it with somebody else because we are all in this together. So this is still an answer to globalization. It talks not about the borders and the physical geography, it talks about humanity within those spaces. And humanity has now had to come together because we all need to find the same cure. It doesn't make sense for any of us to go at it alone. We all want to be the first, of course. We all want to be the one that reaches that mountain. So globalization has definitely become ordinary. And I think moving forward, again, that new normal, as we're now seeing it, will translate. We will become a freer society. We talked anyway before this of trade borders dropping away, of us being able to not need visas into certain regions, being able to trade in ways. That was all pre-COVID. I think that will now go on steroids, so to speak, after we're finished this. The other thing that's happening, which is the reason I hesitate on the answer, is that I'm also seeing now an extreme localization, that we're doing both. This thing about being global and local that we spoke about so long, or glocal was one of the terms we used. We're now seeing me walking around the streets being nice, talking to people I hadn't met before. We're really now saying hello to each other. I went for a walk this morning before this, and literally every person says hello or waves to somebody else. We're collaboratively, even with people that we don't know, that are inside our immediate influence or inside our immediate family, we're actually kind of got one eye out for them. Are they okay? Do they need something? People are sharing food, they're sharing comments, they're sharing friendship. I like that. And that's not a different answer to the one you're asking. We're actually learning that it doesn't matter, I think, in this moment anyway, that where humans are. We are humans and we are connected. We are all in this together. Geography doesn't matter. If we could take just that lesson out of this, Anton, if we could learn from that and continue on from all of that, this is not for you or any of the listeners to say, but I would be willing to say that I've actually thought that was a good thing for us to have done for the last 4 or 5 months. To have gone through that angst to take that human lesson out and move with it forward would be a wonderful thing for us to take away. I'm hoping it's true.
So on that theme of lessons learned, if you had to be able to go back a year to your former self and say, these are lessons coming from this pandemic, these are things we should change before the pandemic comes, what would you say to yourself a year or maybe even 5 years before the pandemic came?
I'm going to answer that with a futurist smile and say, Anton, it's a thing I've been saying for the last 20 or 30 years. It truly is. And that was what we started our conversation with. That this thing we call digital or internet, whatever it is a normal everyday part of our lives. In health, for 15, 20 years, we've been begging literally the bureaucracy to come on board and have e-health, electronic health, to have mobile health. In education, we've had the same ongoing discussion. We don't want to take people out of the physical experience. We just want to supplement it where it's not possible, at least to give them the opportunity then to have a physical embodiment of this. So where children can't get to a school, let's allow school to come to them. Where people need health practitioners and they can't get to them, let's allow them to come to them. In physio, it's exactly the same. It makes perfect sense for people to physically be together, and we would never want to say that that can't be. But at the moment, it can't be. So we need to have the ability to do a bit of both, and we're seeing the ingenuity of people that says, look, this isn't a bad plan B. This will actually help you with your physio and your activities at the moment, seeing we can't be together in a room doing it. So my former self would have said to this COVID version of myself, keep pushing that message, because that's what's getting us out of this. Can you imagine how we would have dealt with this crisis pre-internet? And we did, because despite what everybody says being an unprecedented, it's not. We've gone through calamities before. We had the Spanish flu, we had the bubonic plague, we had horrible wars. We've had all these terrible things, which although not the same, have led to a society saying, yesterday doesn't make sense anymore, today is very different, we're unsure about tomorrow. That's what I mean by precedent times.
Yeah.
This has had a whole new complexity that we've never seen before. The ease with which we're able to keep ourselves up to date with what's happening, the ease with which we've been able to lock ourselves down but not feel isolated, the ease with which we've been able to continue work, health, family, again, not in a perfect sense, is all due to this virtual space. And to me, again, that means that if we can take that away as well as the wonderful community, human aspect of it, we've built the foundations for an incredible world. I said when we went into this, and I still hold it to be true, that in sci-fi language, we've gone into a black hole, and we all know that. But when we come out of it, we will come out of it 5, and some industries 10 years ahead of where we went into it. We will have changed that much, or had the possibility to change that much.
Yeah. We've just seen that with industrial relations, how, you know, it was quite bizarre seeing the Prime Minister thank the head of the ACTU in his first sentence. I mean, a Liberal government Prime Minister saying that was just, I almost fell off my chair when I heard it. But I suppose it does, this whole pandemic has had a dramatic impact on the world of work and working from home and workplace relationships and workplace innovation. What do you think have been the major changes, and how many of those do you think will last post the pandemic?
So, the major change has been the reality that we now work in a fluid workspace. That for many of us, not all, for many of us, the work we do actually doesn't have to be done where, when, and how we did it before. That it can be done in a variety of ways, in a variety of places, but to do it, we need to change our mindset. We need to move away from input, which means we need to move away from 9 to 5, which is traditional, and we've worked that way for the last 150 years. We need to walk away perhaps from management in the way of being micromanaged. And we need to accept that we've hired adults who are responsible for doing the job, and we need to mark them as having done it when they've completed the task to at least the standard and the time that they said it was, which is really what's happening now. People have had to, for obvious reasons, distribute their workforce. They've had to allow them some ability to automate or some ability to be independent in order to complete tasks. And what we're holding people accountable for now is actually doing the work, not how they did it. To me, that's one of the biggest changes moving forward. The other thing is around the structure of life. That we were, for a very long period of time, a society that worked and then played. So we had this 9 to 5 version of ourselves, and then when we came back or went wherever we went after that, we hung that version up on a hook. We took down the version of ourselves, which was the parent, the family, the sports person, and we put that on, and then we hung that up. We kind of went through these different guises all day. We don't do that anymore. We don't have time to hang anything up. We're literally, the cook and chef at 8 o'clock, we're the teacher at 8:15, we're the business person at 8:30, we're the gardener at at 10:45, we're the chef at 12, and we're doing all these things in a really fluid manner without hanging up hats and putting it back. It's actually almost our whole self. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's clumsy. It may not be perfect. It's uncomfortable, but we're doing it. We're actually going back to the fluidity of life. And again, with the responsibility of making sure that every one of those tasks is completed. I'm hoping that we learn that lesson as well, that where it's appropriate, and that's not always, but where it's appropriate, that we can allow people to continue to work that lifestyle if they choose, and if the workplace and society says that all of that's cool and we should do it, then that's one of the lessons coming out of it. In the immediate sense, right now, with the job losses that we're seeing, and today we're told, or yesterday we were told by the ABS, that they believe we're already at 18% unemployment. I believe we're going up to 30%, unfortunately. That's not just unemployment, that's underutilised and people doing jobs they don't want to be in. So I believe when we finish this, 1 in 3 people will be uncomfortable, either because they don't have work or with the work they're doing or the amount of work they're doing, which still leaves us about 2/3 of people that are quite happy. But right now, my advice has been that for that third of the population at least, we need to temporarily move away from thoughts of career, not forever, but just temporarily. Maybe even move away from notions of having a job and instead move into a landscape where we are completing tasks, where we're getting paid to do tasks, because task work is actually easier to find. I'm talking about going in perhaps to a site like a Fiverr, Fiverr, or an Airtasker, or a freelancer, or any of those other things, and saying, well, I at the moment can crochet, or I at the moment can deliver something, I at the moment can write something, I can do this particular task. It's not who I normally am. It's not what I want to do for the rest of my life, but it's something I can actually make some money from, something that the village needs from me. And I can use intermediaries to put those two together. My strong advice to people has been that if that work or career doesn't exist or is on hold for you, then task is where you need to be. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the other joy in that is we're actually getting to stretch other muscles. We're getting to do things that otherwise we might not have been able to do. Yes, for the worst of reasons. Yes, with that terrible thing on our back that we have to put food on the table. I accept that, but we know that. So with all of those conditions, this might be an opportunity to learn, to reskill, to upskill, to change the way that we think about work. And one of the legacies out of this will have to be that most of us, will have a work portfolio rather than a job or a career, meaning that we will be responsible for ourselves, even if we're full-time employed, and we will have some other tricks up our sleeve that we can make money from if we want to or have to. It might be renting out a room, it might be renting out a car, as I said, it might be doing a task, but our mind will no longer just be about this is the only way that I can make income and have joy. This might be the majority, the main, but there are these other things that I can also lend my hands to.
It's going to require a certain amount of resilience in our character, because I think perhaps we've had it very comfortably for many, many years, and this is much more robust, isn't it? It's much more taxing. I think it's not comfortable. We saw a big element in our team moving to work from home. I felt that one of the biggest impacts was the culture of our organization. So you spoke earlier about how organizations needed to trust their workers more, and they needed to be this outcomes-based kind of mindset. What do you think the impact on culture has been, especially company culture, but even more broadly on our general culture?
It goes back to what we were talking about before. I keep using the word human again. What I'm finding in the corporations I'm going in and out of, and again virtually, not physically, is that cultures actually change because people are talking to people. Yeah. They're not talking to colleagues anymore. They're not talking to the worker with the title. They're actually talking to the human. They talk perhaps I think now too much about that cooking, cleaning, that whole other thing that we're doing. And most conversations are starting about that, how was yesterday, how are the kids, are they learning, what do you have for dinner type thing. So we're actually beginning to connect and know more about the human behind the title, behind that career, behind that. Good or bad, that really is about the culture of the organisation. For some organisations, I think it's actually been a blessing because people now are working tighter. They're working independently, but they also have the notion of these humans now they can connect with and they can ask questions of, whereas before they might have been frightened to. I don't want to ask that question because I should know it. So I'm not going to ask because Anton will think less of me. I find people now just jumping in and asking the question. So they're connecting in all sorts of ways. There is, of course, for many people still a huge disconnect because we are herd animals, H-E-R-D. We enjoy being in groups. We enjoy that connectivity of the lunchtime chat and the bit of gossip and all the other things. And for some people, it's been a huge rift. And even doing it virtually has not given them the same comfort or joy that they once had. The reality for that is, unfortunately, as we know, that at least for the next little while, it might just be weeks with what we're told, but for the next little while, that's not going to come back. We need to work harder to bring those people back into the flock, to give them some opportunities to reconnect in ways that they're not currently doing or don't feel satisfied enough about. So that's one side of it. I think we have the humanity of it. The other thing that I'm noticing, and this may be difficult for many of us, is that I'm beginning to question middle management and the role of managers in general. And this is where I usually, the Zoom usually falls out because corporates want to start disconnecting. I don't want to hear this message. So if you start to disconnect, I'll understand why. But it's not that it's unnecessary. It's just in this new model of activity, the role of that middle management really becomes questionable. What is it that she or he is meant to do? We're no longer physically supervising. If we have adults that are responsible for their own outcomes, there's still a role, it's just not what it was before. So we will have to question the notion of our corporate structure when we come out of this, not just for that, but for all the way through, and really look at the legacy systems that we had. In other words, the way we did it before, the structures we had before, the physical beings of who we were, the spaces we sat in, the buildings we were in, the computer systems we were in. All of those are going to have to be up for question. It's still around your notion of culture, because the one thing we know is that culture is built up by physicality, the evidence, the physical being that we're in, because we portray culture by the way our offices look and feel. That's how we give evidence of that. We know psychologically people then work to that model, which is why Google has a different outlook to a medical outfit, to a hospital, to a whatever, because the physicality influences the work and the thoughts. So we're going to have to work on that as well. And we're now going to have to work more on the psychological aspects of culture. How do we actually impart that people to people like bees, going backwards and forwards, and how do we maintain it?
Yeah, that's good. Morris, as a small business leader, what should I be focusing on in the short term and then maybe even the medium term?
So as I said, I break it up into a series of 3 strategies, 3 time zones, 0 to 2 weeks, 2 to 5, and 5 plus. The reason for that is that what's happening in business is we need to react often now. So what I'm suggesting is this is a rolling program. And the rolling program is that whenever something new comes out, so this week we expect to hear a whole lot of liftings of things that we can do. I'm going to suggest to everybody that we go back to 0 and start again. And the next time we do it again, 0 and start again. And that's the way that I'm getting through this, 0 to 5. If we can make it to 5 weeks, then we kind of have a future. So 0 to 2 is really about making sure that we still understand our corporate place. What is it that we are able to do and can do? Is there a purpose for what we do in the immediate world that we're in? Some businesses have had to say no, that there isn't an immediate purpose for them. So that's the first thing, 0 to 2. Is there a purpose in our business? Is there a way forward? If that's so, how do we adapt to the current circumstances or the changes that we believe to be ahead? So if we take, for instance, a physiotherapist and we look at the practice as it currently is, we'd have to answer the question, I think, that physically the way we once offered it right now is not possible. But the notion, the core of the activity still is. So my answer would have been, how do we then deliver that core to people? Is it through apps? Is it through phone? Is it by putting together little webinars? Is it by doing video? Is it by standing outside their home in distance mode, but standing outside their home and actually watching them do what they need to do? And some people are doing that. They've actually taken mobile on the road, and with that nice distance, or looking through windows, with permission of course, they're actually watching what their patients are doing. So that's the first thing. And then making sure that you have the resources, the budget to be able to carry through. What likely income are you going to have out of all of these things? Is that enough for you in the next 5 or 6 weeks or whatever to be able to survive? And then how do I portray that message? How do I get people to know I'm currently doing that? That's naught to really health safety, but health safety of the business. 2 to 5 is being able to say the reality is that we've been around for 2 weeks. That's a long time now. So if that's the case and there's nothing on the horizon, how do we begin to shore down some of those? What's the lessons we've learned? What are the good things from what we've done that we might want to take forward? What is it that we're doing that isn't working because we need to get rid of it quickly? We just don't have the ability anymore to hang on and say, well, maybe it'll work one day. What sorts of people do we need moving forward? What does our workforce look like? Are we able to meet budget with these sorts of things? What is likely to be in the next horizon time zone? And we can only guess at those, but what are the likely scenarios that we might see, and begin to build a beginning of a strategy for each of those. In other words, if we come out of lockdown and physiotherapist clinics can open up normally, this is what we do. If we have one patient in, one patient out, and we can't see anybody apart from that, how do we deal with that?
Yep.
If we go to full belt, in other words, everybody can come and go, it's still not going to be as it was before. How would we get ready for that? And a little bit of thought around each one, so that when that appropriate scenario comes to be, or a hybrid of them, we can begin to roll much quicker than having to just react. And then 5+, which I haven't seen yet, I'm still waiting. 5+ means that we've kind of gone into a situation that is likely to continue for a while. So lessons learned, staffing learned, budgets learned, all of those things in place now. Let's say that this model is most probably not permanent, but it's here for a little while. Let's bed it down and let's keep going with it.
Excellent. Maurice, last question, because I know time is precious. What do you think your biggest takeaway is from this whole pandemic? What's the big thing that's rested with you? I mean, you've mentioned some of those things, digitization, the humanness of our humanity. Is there anything else that you would say are the big takeaways?
The biggest takeaway of all, Anton, is the reality that as human beings, we are capable of change. That we have said, and I've heard for far too long, that we can't change, we don't change. It's all too difficult, it's the way we've always done it. Humans weren't meant to change. Physiologically, our body was built from the moment we were an embryo to the moment we're taken off this earth. Our body physically changes and adapts to situations. Our cells die and grow again and change. That's what COVID is about. I mean, COVID is about cells dying and changing and coming back, and all those technical people are saying is rabbiting on, but you get the message of it. The one absolute takeaway that I'm hoping, above and beyond the humanities and the digitals and all the rest of it, is that each of us pats ourselves on the back. Each of us says, well, in fact, I am capable of change. I know that I can recognize what I need to do. It's uncomfortable. I wish I wasn't pushed to it. What it's done to me is not a good thing. The way that it's changed my life and diverted away from what I might have been. Because this is a mourning period. We are mourning for who we might have been. And we're not quite sure who we will be in the future. But we know we will have a future. And that is the greatest takeaway we have, that we are capable of change. We've proven it to ourselves, we've proven it to our families, and we've proven it to society. So let's now take that as a strong possibility, that we don't just have to accept and go to status quo. If we're not comfortable, let's not let it not take another situation like this ever. If we're not comfortable, if it's not serving us, if it's not doing what we need it to do for us and our family and our society to move forward, let's just say we can make that change. We've shown that we've done it, and let's be willing to do it again and again, as often as we need to.
Morris, thank you so much for your time. There were so many really good thoughts there. We could have been speaking for hours, but we are limited. So thank you for your time, and yeah, we look forward to catching up again in the near future.
As do I. Everyone be safe, be well, and be kind.
Yeah.